Hello everyone and welcome to BHC Studios. In this video, we'll be talking about my 3 favorite camera setups for street photography wherever I am in the world, and I do have a little bias towards the 28mm focal length. And all these cameras here, other than this zoom lens, they all are 28mm, and this zoom lens also has a 28mm focal length at the widest end, and I just put it here so it would remind me to talk about zoom lenses and the 28mm focal length. But in here are 3 of my favorite setups, and the thumbnail pretty much gives it away. But before we start, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, which is KEH Camera. Now, KEH is the original reseller of professional, collectible, and everyday gear for camera lovers everywhere since 1979. They purchase gear directly from photographers like us. They renew and resell at fair prices, and they truly become part of an endless cycle of creativity, community, and opportunity as we get to buy and sell various cameras like these and be able to play with them. And so we'll talk about them a little bit later at the end of the video, but thank you so much, KEH, for sponsoring this video. I love the 28mm field of view, the focal length equivalent. So in APS-C, so you can see we have APS-C cameras here. Here's the Fujifilm 18mm f1.4, which is kind of what started this whole conversation, because I'm getting a lot of comments of people saying, I'd rather get the 16, which I actually do have here. And just so you know, and I did mention in my other videos, I love the 24mm. This is the 24mm in the MD mount for my Minoltas right here. Right here is a 24mm in my autofocus Minolta. And so I have both 28 and 24. I love both of them, use them very differently. Other times they can be interchangeable, but when I look back at all the photos I've taken over the years, going back 25 years, I realize, and actually it really did start with this camera here. This is the OG 28mm camera that I bought way back in 1998, and I didn't think I would love this so much, but I brought this on my honeymoon, and I actually started using this as my B cam for my weddings, and I realized that I actually like these photos, as well as my clients love the pictures that was coming out of my Ricoh GR1 with a 28mm lens. And so this is kind of where it started my journey shooting 28. And as I started experimenting with street photography, and as I started going into digital, I started really enjoying that 28mm equivalent focal length. And the X70 was one of those ones that I had a lot of fun with. It has a 18.5mm, so very close to a 28mm equivalent. And when I compared this to the X100 series, although this is a better built camera, this one here has a very special place in my heart. But as you can see here, I do have the converter on here that converts this to a 28mm equivalent. It even says it right there on the lens, and so I still shoot 28 on my X100 series cameras. But let's pick my number 1 favorite 28mm focal length, and really it's the newest that I've had in my possession. It is this 18mm f1.4 RLMWR. Now, I know a lot of people were hoping for a Mark II version of the 18 f2, or at least a remake, but I don't think Fujifilm does that unless they, like, a lot of the lenses have an f2 and an f1.4 version, and because this didn't have an f1.4 version, I think Fujifilm did make the right decision to create an f1.4 before making a Mark II version of the 18 f2. Now, this lens is very exotic, and it's weird. Even back in the film days, I did look through a lot of my old camera catalogs, and Nikon was the only one that had a 28mm f1.4, and it was like $2,300 back in the year 2000. And they didn't even have a 35 1.4 at the time. Minolta, they had a 28 f2, and they had a 28 f2.8, but they didn't have a 28 1.4. They had a 35 1.4 like a lot of manufacturers, but not a 28 1.4. That was a really weird focal length. In fact, Canon had a 24 1.4, but not a 28 1.4. They had a 28 1.8. And so for people who are kind of confused about this focal length, I understand why, because it was not really that popular. But back in the day, 28 typically was the wide end of zoom lenses. So a lot of lenses were 28 to 70, 28 to 80, 28 to 105, and even today, now they're kind of stretching it to 24 to 105, or 24 to 70, or 24 to 80. But back in the 90s and 2000s, it typically started at 28. So it was a focal length that people were used to, and maybe a focal length people weren't willing to buy as a prime. But a lot of photojournalists, a lot of Magnum photographers shot with a 28. It kind of had that in between a 24 and a 35. You can get up close to your subjects, and having this 1.4 really helped me to shoot at night. Even if I wasn't shooting at 1.4, you start getting the starburst, the sunburst at f4, and I really enjoyed doing that. And so this lens right now, and not necessarily a combination with the X Pro 3. Although for street photography, I think the X Pro 3 is nice because you can just flip this down. The X-T4 does have IBIS, which is really nice. But for street, I like to shoot waist level often. And so really any Fujifilm camera. I've even seen people have this on an XS10, but this lens and this setup here, the 18f1.4 with any of my Fujifilm X series bodies is my #1 choice. All right, my number 2 is actually the film camera, the Leica M7 with a 28. Now this is a 28mm Rokkor, and this was actually made for the CLE and the CL system. This is an f2.8, but the combination I really like is actually with this lens right here, which is the original Summicron, the 28 f2, and this is non 6-bit. This was made for the film era, so I believe that this is better corrected. There was no software correction for this lens here. Reasonably compact for an f2 lens. Now they do have a 28-1.4 that came out like 5 years ago, but it's a monster. And would I consider buying it? I probably wouldn't. I think I'm happy with the 28 f2 for my Leica film system. This is my main lens that I use while I'm in Hong Kong or traveling, and I've taken fantastic photos with this. And with the combination with an M series body, as well as on my CLE, this Summicron is a fantastic lens. And I pretty much use this as my main lens for my Hong Kong Neon project. And the resolution is great on this. I love that this lens is so compact and light. Not a cheap lens, but definitely cheaper than the 28-1.4. And if you can't afford the Summicron, there is a 28 f2.8, which is actually a really, really sharp lens. And if you're not going to be shooting at night, I would recommend to get the 28 f2.8 instead of the f2 to save money as well as size and weight. Now my number 3 setup, and it's pretty much my EDC, and it is the Ricoh GR3. Now this camera has a lot of quirks. It doesn't have a built-in flash, autofocus isn't so great in low light, and the battery is tiny and it doesn't last very long, and there is no EVF option even if you wanted it. And so this is a quirky camera, but this camera goes with me everywhere. It's so small, compact, and light. This is the 1/1.7, I think, or 1.65 censored. This is the last non-APS-C Ricoh GR they made, and it's about the same size. Look how compact it is. And so I don't even mind if Ricoh decided to go back to the GR and the GR2 size. It is slightly bigger, as you can see right here, but it does come with a pop-up flash. This camera actually in many ways can outshoot this right here, the XF18. And the reason why is because look at the diameter of this lens. Look how big it is. It uses a 62mm filter thread. And look at this guy, look how small it is. And in a very specific situation, this actually worked out better, which is shooting through a chain link fence. Because this lens is so small, you can poke through the chain link fence and you don't see it. Where this one here, I had to kind of fandangle my way, and in some of the shots, you can even see the chain link fence. And so it is great that I have f1.4. It's 2 stops brighter than this lens here. This is a 2.8, but again, this has IBIS, so I can't handhold this down to like a quarter or a third of a second, and I can still get a sharp image. Of course, I can still handhold this down to a quarter or third of a second with IBIS as well. In the end, this camera is always with me. This is still kind of chunky, and so if I was at a wedding or a funeral or anywhere where I don't want to be carrying anything too big and bulky, I would definitely carry the Ricoh GR. And that's really the secret weapon of this camera, is that it's so small and compact. It's very stealthy. No one questions you if they see you shooting with this. You just think you're a tourist or you have some old camera from the early 2000s or something. And so having this with you all the time, having IBIS and having this 28mm equivalent field of view is really awesome. So those are the 3 main cameras that I like to use for street photography, which is the Ricoh GR3, the Leica M7 with the 28 Summicron, and the Fujifilm X Pro 3 with the 18mm f1.4 RLMWR. So those are the 3 favorite cameras that I love to shoot for street photography and sort of everyday photography. Doesn't matter if it's a point and shoot or if it's a film rangefinder or a digital camera. And I'd like to thank again KEH for sponsoring this video. KEH is the original camera re-commerce company serving the photographic community since 1979. So that's a very long time. And they've really become the largest curated market for field-tested, expert-graded photo and video equipment in the industry. They have over 60,000 items in stock, up to 40% below retail, 100% KEH approved, appraised, graded, renewed, and resold with a 180-day warranty. So I have discount codes down below. If you trade cameras in, you will get an extra 5%. And if you're buying anything from the website, you will get 5% off. And if you're trading in and buying at the same time, you get 10%, but you can't stack those discounts on top of my already discount codes, but you get 10% off. You could trade in a camera or lens that you're not using and it'll find a really good home, and you get to play with a camera or lens that you don't currently have that you get to enjoy. So go check out the website and you'll see more collaborations with KEH in the near future. Thank you KEH again for sponsoring this video. Now let's finish this video off. So just to conclude, for me, I love the 28mm. I know most people will love the 35, and I also do enjoy 35, and as I mentioned, I also enjoy the 24mm focal length. And so let me know down below which focal length you like, what system you like to use. Is it APS-C? Is it 35mm? Is it medium format? Is it point and shoot? Is it film? Is it digital? Let me know what you like to shoot with. So thanks again, KEH. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon, and happy shooting.